According to biker journalists and commentators, Hells Angels MC is the biggest 1%er club in the world, with over 3,000 members and hundreds of chapters in more than 50 countries, covering almost every continent on the planet. But how did a small MC club from California become the most well-known, feared, admired and powerful 1% MC club in the world? This is the fascinating history of Hells Angels MC. Hi and welcome to my channel. Before I begin, I would like to emphasize that I'm not going to cover everything that has happened, but focus on the events that biker journalists and commentators think are the most important events in the club's history. But first, some background. The first motorbike was invented already in 1885 and it was the Daimler Reitwagen, which is considered to be the world's first true motorcycle. Gottlieb Daimler is often referred to as the father of the motorcycle because of this invention, and it was his son, Paul, who rode it for the first time in November 1885. The first biker clubs started already in 1903 in America, but these clubs were poorly organized and were at this time only involved in petty crimes. The motorbikes at the time were faster than the police cars, so bikers would do the same as the Vikings did, raid and steal, and then quickly escape before the police came. After the Second World War, there was a huge surplus of motorbikes left from the army that was sold, and a motorcycle now became the cheapest form of motorized transportation. This, along with the return of countless veterans coming back to America, where many of them had a difficult time readjusting to civilian life. They searched for the adventure and adrenaline rush associated with life at war, because civilian life felt too monotonous. They craved the feelings of excitement and danger. Some sought the close bond and camaraderie found between men in the army, while others wanted to combat their horrifying memories from the war, many in the form of post-traumatic stress disorder. Thus motorcycling emerged stronger than ever, and became a substitute for wartime experiences such as adventure, excitement, danger and camaraderie. Men who had been a part of the motorcycling world before the war were now joined by thousands of new members. When the Galloping Goose formed in 1942, it was initially a Los Angeles racing team. However, they soon grew into an outlaw MC club and spread out through the United States. They are credited with creating the foundation, rules, and many of the principles MC clubs still follow to this day. The Galloping Goose participated in the 1947 Hollister Rally, where thousands of motorcycles gathered in Hollister, California. The Hollister Riot, also known as the Hollister Invasion, was an event that occurred in Hollister, California, in July 1947. At the American Motorcyclist Association's Gypsy Tour Motorcycle Rally, many more motorcyclists than expected flooded the small town to watch the annual rallies, as well as to socialize and drink. However, some of the motorcyclists caused a commotion in the town, and some were arrested. The incident, known afterwards as the Hollister Riot, was sensationalized by the press with reports of
pandemonium
and
bikers taking over the town.
The symbol of the riot became a photo of a man sitting on a motorcycle, possibly staged by the photographer, by surrounding the scene with discarded beer bottles. It was published in Life magazine and it brought national attention and negative opinion to the event. The AMA released a statement saying that they had no involvement with the Hollister Riot and that
the trouble was caused by the 1% deviant that tarnishes the public image of both motorcycles and motorcyclists.
The AMA statement led some biker clubs to adopt the term, and they started to refer to themselves as 1%ers, as a badge of honor. The formation of Hells Angels. According to their own website, Hells Angels' first chapter was founded in March 1948 in San Bernardino, California. There were other clubs with the same name in the state at the time, but they were not associated with the San Bernardino chapter and none of them exists today. The club's name was first suggested by Arvid Olsen, an associate of the founders, who had served in the Hells Angels Squadron of the Flying Tigers in China during World War II. The name was inspired by the tradition from both world wars where the Americans gave their squadrons fierce and death-defying titles, like the 3P-40 squadrons of Flying Tigers, fielded in Burma and China, which was dubbed Hells Angels. During the 50s the club expanded in California with their next chapters being San Francisco and Oakland. The Oakland chapter of the club was founded in part by Sonny Barger, who went on to become a well-known figure and a leader of the club nationwide, and has also written a book about being an angel. In the beginning the different Hells Angels chapters had little or nothing to do with each other, but they later came up with criteria and rules for admission to the club. The rules of the club were now formalized and implemented, and some of them are as follows. Members must be voted in unanimously by all members of the chapter. Patches and vests are part of a strict dress code and must never be destroyed. Members always back their brothers. The code of silence is mandatory. Members can't be snitches or rats, nor work for a prison or be a cop. Members and applicants need to pay dues and attend meetings. The club comes first, unconditionally. And you are always a Hells Angel. Women aren't allowed to become members, but they're hanging around and are referred to as old ladies, and they have their own set of rules they need to abide by. An anonymous lady veteran told the South Texas biker that the women are expected to
respect their men, and we do it by first not touching his vest or his bike, and definitely not leaning against the patch when you're riding. Asking any questions, interrupting men who are talking, and questioning what the man does are all absolutely forbidden.
In other words,
keep quiet and look pretty.
Hells Angels became an international club when in 1961, the first chapter outside California and USA was formed in New Zealand. But it was the Lynch Report that really put them on the map and gave them national fame in America. Thomas Lynch, a California Attorney General, released in 1965 a report of outlaw motorcycle gangs in the state, where he singled out Hells Angels. The investigation for this happened after a gang rape at a Monterey Beach the year before. The report was devastating and said that the 450 members of the club had a record of 874 felony arrests, 300 felony convictions, and more than 1,000 misdemeanor convictions. The report also mentioned that many of the people they wanted to interview had been frightened, and refused to talk to them. The criminal actions listed by the Lynch Report ranged from the terrorization of rural communities to the theft of motorcycle parts, and included charges of attempted murder, assault and battery, and narcotics violations. Several club members were arrested in connection with the case, but in interviews, the Hells Angels disputed many of the details in the report, but the report captured the news media's attention, pushing the club further into the spotlight. In 1965, Hunter Thompson was hired to write a story about Hells Angels in California, and he spent a year with the club. After writing the article, he received several offers to write books, and in 1966 Random House published Hells Angels, The Strange and Terrible Saga of the Outlaw Motorcycle Gangs. The relationship between Thompson and the Angels broke down, because the bikers perceived that Thompson was exploiting them for personal gain, and demanded a share of his profits from his book. This breakdown led to Hells Angels giving Thompson a severe beating, called stomping, and the brawl continued between the two parts, and was even broadcasted live on TV. This very public row helped Hells Angels to strengthen their position and made them feared and admired among other biker clubs. Many now wanted to become Hells Angels. The release of the film Hells Angels on Wheels, with Jack Nicholson and a small appearance by Sonny Barger, along with several other biker films, also helped to cast Hells Angels into even more stardom. In 1969 the first European charter becomes reality in England. 2 charters are issued, one in South London and one in East London, and according to the group's website, the 2 merges into a single chapter in 1973. The Altamont Free Concert. In 1969, the Rolling Stones hire Hells Angels for security at their concert. The crowd surpassed the number the organizers had prepared for, and the concert spiraled out of control. By the time the main event, the Rolling Stones took to the stage, members of Hell's Angels had already been accused of violence against the crowd. During the Stone set, an angel, Alan Passaro, stabbed Meredith Hunter, an 18-year-old, to death. Hunter had approached the stage, and was violently driven off by members of the Hell's Angels. He subsequently returned to the stage area, drew a revolver, and was stabbed to death by Hell's Angel Alan Passaro. Passaro pleaded self-defense and was acquitted of murder. A deadly fight. At a motorcycle trade show in Cleveland, a brawl breaks out between the Breed Gang from Ohio and the New York chapter of the Hells Angels. 5 bikers were killed. This included Jeffrey Groover Coffey of the New York chapter. The police charged 57 members of the combined gangs with murder, though many of the charges was later dropped or reduced. The same year, 8 members were arrested in connection with the rape of a 17-year-old girl in a leather goods store. With all the negative attention around Hell's Angels, the New York neighbors questioned their closeness of their clubhouse, and wanted them to move. This dispute would last for many years, eventually making the New York chapter become a religion. More on that later. When the bodies of 2 men and a woman was found buried at a ranch near Ukiah in California, 3 members were arrested. This added to the growing impression among regular people that the biker clubs was becoming organized criminal organizations. Hell's Angels conquers the world. It was during the 70s and 80s that Hell's Angels really started to expand and open new chapters in the USA, England, Canada, the Netherlands, Germany, and later Scandinavia, and in this way becoming the biggest and most spread out club in the world. But this also brought a lot of attention from law enforcement, and several Hells Angels members were prosecuted on RICO charges, including Sonny Barger. However, the jury wasn't able to reach a verdict, and a mistrial was declared against 18 members, but the court found them guilty of 12 lesser charges. Barger took the stand and admitted his own use and sale of drugs, but denying any conspiracy, saying,
"The Angels are like a family, and one rotten apple doesn't make the whole club criminal."
When the first Danish chapter was established in Copenhagen, a brutal war broke out against their fiercest rival in Denmark, Bullshit MC. The war lasted for 11 years, where Hells Angels killed 3 presidents of the rival club, resulting in a clear victory for the Angels. This war would later evolve into the Great Nordic Biker War between Bandidos and Hells Angels in the 90s. I made videos about both of those wars, there's a link in the description below. In 1983, the documentary Hells Angels Forever was released. The film was co-produced by Sandy Alexander, the president of the New York chapter. The members of Hells Angels now for the first time, holds a press conference to promote the movie. The film claims it is
the true story of an American phenomenon,
and says that the Brotherhood of Motorcyclists had been the target of a conspiracy by law enforcement authorities. 1984 saw more overseas expansion, when the first South American charter was issued in Rio de Janeiro, followed by expansion to Africa and their first chapter in South Africa in 1993, followed by Egypt and Namibia later. In an attempt to stop the federal government from seizing their New York clubhouse, the New York City chapter was incorporated under New York state law as a religious, non-profit organization, so the group fighting the seizure was now formally known as the Church of Angels. This was to counter a 1984 law that allows the government to seize property used in drug trafficking. The Angels' lawyer insists that details of the government's case was wrong, as is the public perception of the club, saying,
"In the Hells Angels, there are probably some people you wouldn't want to have over for dinner, but the media hype about them has been exaggerated."
A time for war. After winning the war with Bullshit MC in Denmark, Hells Angels patched over several clubs in the Nordic countries, spreading to Norway, Sweden, Finland, and eventually even to Iceland, a country with less than 400,000 people. In an effort to not fall behind the Hells Angels' dominance, Bandidos opened several chapters in the Nordic countries, even letting former Angels members who had been thrown out of the club join Bandidos. The Great Nordic Biker War lasted for 4 years, without any clear winner, and the bombing of Bandidos Clubhouse in Drammen, along with several rocket attacks by Bandidos, made the governments of the Scandinavian countries threaten to make biker clubs illegal.
Nok en eksplosjon I nybyen her. Jeg må flytte meg lenger unna, for dette her kjente jeg faktisk.
The Norwegian Prime Minister, Thorbjorn Jagland, was completely shocked after visiting the bomb site of the Bandidos headquarter bombing, saying,
"These satanic killers are inhuman, and they must be punished according to the law."
The two clubs now quickly negotiated a peace treaty between them. However, the peace wouldn't last for very long, and the war continued after a few years without violence. The same year, 1994, the Quebec Biker War started in Canada. The war was between Hells Angels and Rock Machine and is the bloodiest and most deadly biker war of all time. The war was about the control over the narcotics business in Quebec, but of course also driven by the intense rivalries between the clubs. The seed of this war was planted already in December 1977, when Hells Angels moved into Quebec and took part in the drug trade, and attempted to squeeze rival biker gang, Rock Machine, out of the lucrative drug business. By the early 1990s, tensions between the two gangs exploded into a bloody war. Hells Angels set up helper clubs, which are small clubs that work for them, in hope that they one day will be patched over and become Hells Angel members themselves. The Angels created a vast pool of these helpers, and in this way protecting full members of Hells Angels from direct connections to the drug trade. After the Angels began creating puppet clubs, Rock Machine did the same, and an arms race between the two clubs now started for real. The war began on July 13, 1994, when 3 masked men shot and killed Pierre Daoust, a member of a Hells Angels affiliated club called the Death Riders. Rock Machine struck again the next day, attempting to kill a member of the Hells Angels. Later the same day, Quebec's police arrested several members of Rock Machine for attempting to blow up the clubhouse of a Hells Angels support club in Montreal. Within weeks, all Hells Angels chapters in Quebec had voted to join the conflict. The Bandidos Canada had been looking to take advantage of this opportunity to regain territory lost and take new territory from the Angels, and Rock Machine became a chapter of the Bandidos in mid-1999, and all members were patched over and became Bandidos in 2001. They would remain as a single entity until the events of the Shedden Massacre, in 2006. The Shedden Massacre involved the killing of 8 men, whose bodies were found in a field 5 kilometers north of Shedden, a small village in Ontario, in 2006. The vehicles with the bodies inside were first discovered by a farmer. The day after, 5 people, including 1 member of the Bandidos, were arrested for the murders, and 3 more people were arrested later. According to journalists Félix Seguin and Eric Thibault, the biker war ended after the Angels had eliminated all competition among Quebec's outlaw biker gangs. The war left a whopping 162 people dead, including an 11-year-old boy, who were killed by shrapnel from a bomb. There were a total of 84 bombings, and 130 cases of arson. According to one biker commentator,
even the mafia couldn't compete with these numbers.
The police arrested about 120 members and associates of Hells Angels, leading to many years of trials and long prison sentences. However, this left Hells Angels as the only national 1% biker club in Canada, and on October 1, 2007, the Bandidos website announced,
Bandidos Canada is officially shut down. There are no more Bandidos members in Canada.
Hells Angels had won the war over Canada. Protecting the trademark. In 2006, Hells Angels sued Walt Disney for trademark infringement, saying that a planned movie called Wild Hogs infringed their trademark name and Death's Head logo. This is one of numerous suits brought by the club to protect its brand, including one against the fashion house of Alexander McQueen in 2010. Hells Angels had now become big business. In 2012, Hells Angels conquered the world when they opened chapters in Thailand and in Japan 2014. The Angels now has chapters on every continent, except in Antarctica. The Hells Angels have been banned by an entire country. In 2019, Hells Angels was banned in the Netherlands, along with Satudara MC. The Dutch court ruled that
the worldwide Hells Angels organization should be considered a foreign corporation, and Hells Angels Holland as an informal association under Dutch law.
And the court banned these two clubs in the Netherlands. The court also ruled that
Dutch Hells Angels charters qualify as legal entities under Dutch law. This means, among other things, that the members are no longer allowed to wear the Hells Angels colors in public, and the charters are no longer allowed to publicize under the name Hells Angels.
This happened after many violent incidences involving Hells Angels and other one-percenter clubs in the country, along with several negative media coverage, among them, the storming of a Dutch TV studio in December 2000. Here, 10 members of Hells Angels broke into a studio just before broadcast of Frits Barend and Henk van Dorp's TV show, who had called Hells Angels a criminal organization. The TV men were hit hard, and forced to apologize for the statement on TV, and from then on they had to call Hells Angels a motorcycle club, not a criminal organization. Is it possible to leave Hells Angels? The short answer to this is yes and no. You are supposed to be an angel forever, but if you break the rules or does something very upsetting for the club, you can be left in so-called bad standing. This means that you are thrown out and now are a legitimate target for all the members in the club, and there have been instances where former members have been killed, got their house burned down, or other forms of punishment. An example of being thrown out in bad standing, we have from one of the founding members of Hells Angels Denmark, Jorn Nielsen, who was kicked out a few years ago. In 2020, Junge was kicked out of Hells Angels, after being a member for 40 years, and in an interview in the newspaper, Avisen, he says, "It was probably because I was no longer as much present in the club as before. A small group managed to sneak up on me and I was thrown out in a way that most of all resembled a coup." He now lives at a secret location in Denmark. You can learn more about him and the founding of Hells Angels Denmark in my video, The First Danish Biker War. You can leave the club in two other ways too. One example is George Christie, who left peacefully, but is now out bad, and explained his departure in this way.
"I felt we became the people we rebelled against, and that's exactly what I told them at the meeting when I left. At one time, we would interact with all the clubs up and down the coast, and by 2011, we were fighting every major outlaw bike club in the United States, plus law enforcement. That's where some people lost perspective of what the initial intent was of the whole outlaw lifestyle. It seemed more military, like an army fighting another army."
Leaving the club out bad means, they don't want people interacting with you, they don't want people talking to you at all.
Club members who I was friendly with after I left, had their memberships in jeopardy if they communicated with me. When I left, it kind of reminded me of a divorce. At first, everyone wanted to be amiable. They weren't happy about my decision, but they understood it. As things progressed, it became aggressive, and it was hard to take.
After years with the club, the member David Labrava, who also is an actor and writer, decided to leave Hells Angels in 2019, a year after his 16-year-old son committed suicide. Labrava announced his departure from the Angels in an Instagram post, saying,
"I want to say I am no longer a member of the largest motorcycle club in the world, the Hells Angels. The only club I am a member of now is the human race. I am no longer a patch holder. I am no longer in the patch holding set. I am now what is considered to be a civilian."
Labrava went on to say that he left in good standing, and it was his own decision, and thanked the Hells Angels for his time with them. Becoming a government informant. There are a few members who have become police informants, and Dave Atwell is the highest-ranking member of the Hells Angels in history to flip on the club, becoming an informant on the Hells Angels for the police in the late 2000s. He says,
After my arrest, I began to see the club in an entirely different light. The guys weren't angels because they wanted to ride bikes and have a good time together. They were all in it for themselves. When we got in trouble, every guy just took the easiest way out, no matter who got hurt. I was trapped, not by bars, but by the limitations the club had put on me and my life.
So Atwold took a deal, offered by the police, that he says allowed him to escape from the club. He secretly recorded the happenings in his chapter and became instrumental in bringing down a massive drug operation. He now lives in the Witness Protection Program. I hope you found this presentation interesting, and if you did, please smash the like button. And please subscribe if you haven't done that already, and leave a comment below. And I hope to see you in the next one.